Now we're live. Hello, Internet. Welcome to Animal Men, part 3 of 4. Now we have that worked out. Here with my cohort, Sleepy Reader, Damien. How are you doing tonight?
Sleepy cohort here. Tonight we're going to do Animal Man 17 through 22.
Yes.
And then next episode we'll do the last 4 of Morrison's run and then kind of attempt to talk about the whole thing, I guess.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes when we get there. Because I feel like there's going to be a roundness to it given the way it went, I guess.
Right. And there'll be a lot, I think there'll be a lot to reflect on how this was the beginning of the Grant Morrison that we now know.
Yeah. And we're going to get to some of that tonight, actually. So.
Right. And we already have, I suppose, previously. We've already talked about this weird mix of the deconstructing comics and the animal rights and the family drama and the superhero stuff. And we're going even deeper into that, I guess.
Yeah, so you should show them the cover because I have the digital.
Oh.
So it doesn't work as...
We love this disturbing cover
of
Animal Man with an abused animal. Well, that looks pretty good.
Way brighter. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's issue 17, which actually has a very interesting issue, I thought.
Yeah, well, I was expecting like this really just like... I was expecting the dolphin issue again, but with animal testing, basically. Right. Which, but I mean, we start off with the Mirror Master. And
right, we start off with the Mirror Master meeting with this guy who seems like a CIA assassin type.
Right.
In sort of cliche of movies and stuff. A guy with sunglasses and no emotions and wears a trench coat. Right. And I think he meets with Mirror Master in a Scottish graveyard. If I knew anything about Scotland, maybe I would know where that is. Or maybe it's just made up by the artist. This artist puts in so little detail, but
that's fair.
But it's a fun scene where you start liking the Mirror Master. I think Morrison likes the Mirror Master quite a bit.
Well, I've always been
Scott.
Well, maybe that. I also thought he's an interesting villain, and it's kind of cool that they have him here because there's no weird animal thing about him or anything. It really adds something that they're not trying to go too far with the whole deal. And
well, he's a classic Silver Age Flash villain.
Yeah,
and kind of has a nice twisting of reality quality to him that fits in with Grant Morrison's desires to shatter and play around with the reality. And I don't think I mentioned it before, but in Morrison's autobiographical parts of his book about superheroes, super gods, he talks about his most favorite book as a kid. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
He talks about his most favorite book as a kid where the Flash is on the cover talking to the reader saying, "Only you can save me," looking right out at the reader and talking to them. So I think one portion of Morrison's influence here is the Silver Age Flash and the slightly sort of almost accidentally postmodern things that used to happen in that Flash. And of course, that's the first place where the multiple worlds theory in comics came about.
That's true. Huh. That's an interesting connection. I also like the idea of the Mirror Master like having that whole like world-shattering thing, because a lot of the villains, not animal-based, but they have some weird kind of reality bend deal with them in some way or another.
Right. Right.
Interesting. Yeah, so and then
so sorry for dumping all that there, but because we get the Mirror Master comes back for a few issues, and then we go to what we're now kind of used to is the animal rights kind of aspect of the book. Only something different happens, right?
Right. But yeah, these thugs are trying to break out. I mean, extreme PETA members are trying to break out the animals from the cage, but the monkeys have their eyes sewn shut, and who knows? I don't know. That was weird.
Right. And as far as we know, they're just doing this experiment on monkeys just to see what will happen or something. And then they decide, the big point is they decide to torch the building after they rescue the monkeys. And Animal Man sort of says, well, I don't think you should do that. And the other guy says, just get the monkeys out of here, Animal Man. I know what I'm doing. So it's like he's the flunky to these terrorists, I guess, these PETA terrorists, as you kind of put it.
Yeah. Which, I mean, it's bizarre to see him in that role, because suddenly he's a crook, but he's trying to do the right thing that he's been doing all throughout the book at the same time as well. I don't know.
Right. Well, to skip ahead a little bit.
Yeah, it seems so random in hindsight now.
Well, to skip ahead a little bit, eventually we find out the fire they lit caused a fireman to almost die, and he's in the hospital, with severe burns and may or may not survive. And Animal Man feels terrible. He didn't feel terrible, though. We talked about him killing some guy on the Faroe Islands a while back.
Yeah, but that guy was doing harm and whatnot, whereas this guy was
animals. He wasn't a noble fireman.
Right. Someone actively trying to help, not harm, and yeah. So there's that. And then there's this whole talk with Animal Man and kind of him just trying to be a superhero to becoming this, radical vegetarian animal rights guy that just can't help but lecture his friends and family about every little thing.
I'm almost surprised they didn't bring in something of like some other Justice Leaguers coming to take him down, behaving like a criminal. I mean, he's pretty public about it. Is it in this issue or another issue where he appears on a talk show?
It's this
issue,
one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I couldn't help but feel like maybe this felt like so slice of life. I wonder if Grant Morrison maybe had a period where he was maybe a little too harsh with his friends or something. He was trying to reconcile, trying to do the right thing, getting others to do the right thing, but maybe going too far and that sort of deal. Like something about the sequence just seems so raw, but at the same time, like more was there than just what was going on in the comic.
True. Well, it feels almost like, Animal Man gets kind of flustered and unable to really do a good job of defending himself on this TV show sequence.
Yeah.
It's like he's morally confused. You think Morrison was morally confused, or I don't know.
I mean, maybe not to that extent, but maybe some experience inspired this in some way or another, right? So I don't know, just it felt a little beyond the way that normally comes through with these kinds of comics.
Although I feel like Morrison has not, in the course of earlier adventures, thought through what the morality here is. Like I don't know. I'm over reading into it, but.
No, that makes sense. What's also interesting here in the TV outburst is he makes explicit that he doesn't want to be considered a role model for children. He wants to.
Right.
He doesn't want the responsibility.
I will take extreme action, and it's not my responsibility. Right. Yeah, so that may be sort of talking to the comic book audience. Do I have to make my comic books acceptable reading for children, perhaps?
Oh, that's nifty.
When you were talking, I suddenly thought that.
Yeah, no, that's good, though. That kind of talks about, because this had to have been more radical in its day, and I wouldn't know where to find articles of the time, but the idea that people are maybe reading this and maybe thinking it was too political, because we certainly hear that nowadays when certain books get over a line, as it were. Well, should politics be in this entertainment and whatnot? That seems to come up every few years with one book or another, and it's a stupid debate. But
in 1989, most superhero comic books still had the Comics Code Authority on them.
That's true.
And I can't remember the dates now, but I looked on Wikipedia, and DC and Archie were the two last companies to stop using the code.
Right.
So he was working for a very clean-cut company at the time, although obviously they'd published The Dark Knight and Watchmen by then. So they were kind of a company with a mixture of approaches to superheroes at that point.
But I think they kind of, how do I say, they rated it. So like they're like, this book would be code worthy and under that, and this one wouldn't, which I think was part of the reason Animal was considered Vertigo, which is something that was kind of bugging me as we were reading this.
But does it say, back before they invented the Vertigo line, I don't think they had anything saying for mature readers on here. But of course, the reproductions of covers here may reduce some of the cover.
Well, I should have the original one here. Let me look at it again now that we're talking about it. Yeah, no, it's just DC. There's no code. It's just, is a normal comic flying without the code.
I also think Morrison had, I mean, I'm really getting meta on Morrison here, but I feel like from what I know of him from his book and from other things I've read, he may have been conflicted between wanting to write things that weren't superhero books at all and also wanting to write superhero books and not being able to decide which he was doing.
I mean, possibly.
I always thought back on this as a big anti-superhero book, a non-superhero book that happened to have a superhero in it.
It's interesting. I mean, I could see that, but it still is so, I mean, there's still the Mirror Master, there's still the reference, all this Justice League nonsense, there's all this, I mean, there's no,
right.
There's all this stuff. It's kind of hard to pin it one way.
And so his manager, who'd been managing his career as a celebrity superhero, doesn't want anything to do with him anymore.
Right.
And then he goes on TV and kind of has this semi-moral breakdown on TV where he kind of loses the debate against the pro experimenting on animals scientist. And it's his wife, I think, who gets pissed off at him about the firemen.
Yeah.
But then intercut is the appearance of this physicist again, who is now starting to be partially erased from, or undrawn, the way Hamid Ali or whatever. Hamid Ali,
right.
Was that his name? Who was undrawn earlier in the comic. So as we're struggling with these moral questions, and then we're also got the whole question of if any of this is anything but being inside a comic book.
Right, and then we start off the next chapter, and we get the we got the text again of like we saw there was that computer typing over and over again. Yeah.
Whose computer is that on? I think it's supposed to be on Grant Morrison's computer, the author of the book.
I believe so, yeah.
Which makes me wonder if, like 10 issues before, when we saw a computer screen, if he was already thinking of that as his own.
That's the thing, as we can press on here, I start to see more and more ties to the beginning, and whereas I don't necessarily believe that was the way it was planned out from the start, it is coming together at the end, which is still fine. Like, it's making for a stronger ending and accounting for a lot of the weird inconsistencies we were pointing out from the very beginning.
Right. I mean, since he himself confesses he didn't know what to do next when he created that Roadrunner story, it seems like he very quickly started putting in pieces that either he semi knew what he was going to do with it, or he started to really quickly figure out this really long-term plan, which again was more unusual to have a long-term plan back in the 80s than now.
Yeah.
Superhero. Now, unfortunately, one of the things I hate is people learning the truth by taking psychedelic drugs. So while I'm into all this, suddenly they go and take peyote. Of course, they go out into the desert, you know, just like, what was that popular series of books written by someone who called himself Don Juan or something? Back in the 70s and into the 80s, there was this popular series of books about this guy who took peyote and met this old Indian or Mexican out in the desert who told him the truths of reality. And he wrote best-selling books based on that. I wish I could remember the name of those books. Did I write that?
No, I said Easy Rider? I don't know.
No.
Yeah, but I agree with you. There's this whole weird psychedelic sequence, and I always feel that, to me, psychedelic sequences are just a way to get to a dream that's supposed to have more relevance, but it's not. It feels cheap.
It feels very cheap.
But
some cool things happen during the psychedelic experience, and the artist steps up a bit his normal kind of dull visuals. So there's stuff in it I liked, but I was just sort of in the back of my mind angry the whole time that this was all just a peyote trip.
Yeah, I kind of glazed over this issue because I was like, drugs, okay.
But this is where we get the beginning of what other to the idea of the red. Now we have the green and the red, but back then he talks about he throws in the red here, but he's mostly talking about the morphic field.
Right, which I think is a better title
than the red. Yeah, I do like that morphic field kind of thing.
Well, because the whole reason they did the red was to have the green versus the red, and then the rod, and then we have Rot World, which was... Anyways, we're talking about good comics, so let's stay...
Right. So, and then while he's still tripping, I think, we see this government killer coming to his family's house. So he's off, tripping his head out, going to Burning Man before Burning Man. While his wife is being stalked by killers.
In a lot of ways, he was ahead of his time. What really got me
I mean...
that last frame with Lennox...
I'm sorry, what got to you what?
The last frame with Lennox with those huge glasses.
Uh-huh.
Is the name right? I was thinking of Sandman with the Leviathan, that monster that has the teeth for eyes. It's very similar, and that I couldn't help but think of that. It's the same facial expression.
And I don't know who came first, and they might both be based on other images from pop culture. And later, the guys the government guys in the Matrix are a lot like this guy.
Yeah. Agent Smith. Yeah.
Agent Smith.
I wouldn't have drawn that, but yeah. So then we get another writing on the computer thing, and
right. We also get a cover that I think gives away too much. You know, that shows Animal Man out of the comic book panel, tapping on the shoulder of the other character.
Yeah. I thought it worked though, and
yeah. So we see the computer, and I think we're pretty clear at this point that it must be the comic book writer's computer.
Yeah.
Did you feel that was obvious by then? I mean, you kind of knew it was coming.
Well, yeah, some of it was ruined for me, I guess, but seeing that was there, and it leads to Animal Man getting to an argument with future Animal Man.
Does he get? Oh, you're right. With past Animal Man, Golden Age or Bronze Age Animal Man, or whatever. The one who's older and doesn't have children.
Yeah.
So the Animal Man of the previous continuity before the crisis.
Yeah.
It's not fair. Wasn't I good enough?
Who's responsible? Yeah. That whole. But then he just churns, and then you get this really famous page, you know.
Right. I can see you.
Yeah, which is.
It's not done as well as the cover, though.
No.
The cover conveys that outside of the comic book frame better. But so I think this is, I need to find that issue of Flash that so influenced Grant Morrison as a child. But I bet that this looks somewhat like it, like the Flash's big face looking out at you from the cover of whatever issue of the Flash it was.
Oh, okay.
But of course, then he comes down and the peyote trips over, and so none of that was real.
Yeah, that took way too long. That's basically 2 issues of
of tripping.
And then he just walks in on his family dead.
Right.
Which I don't know.
Yeah, and really he and his friend should be dead from their tripping. Because they were on the edge of a cliff and they constantly seemed to be about to fall off. But anyway, yeah. It seemed kind of weird to me how he made this big reveal of I can see you, and then he pulled away from it. It's like that was more than he could handle doing at that point. He couldn't go any further in that direction. He had to pull back, go back to other trippy things like the giant whale that eats them, and then have them wake up from their trip.
But then we have Lennox talking to the panel of evil. I don't know. I was taking that they're supposed to be in some sort of official capacity because there's.
Have you moved on to issue 20 now?
Oh yeah, I did. Sorry.
Right. So you kind of skipped over some stuff where he's in a state of shock because his family's dead. Actually, and I just wanted to say, I thought the artist did a really good job of like these panels that are fading in and out of black and stuff.
Oh,
yeah. Then we see Lennon, the government, visiting these people who literally sit at a giant high desk with the American flag behind them, even though apparently they just represent industry, pharmaceutical industries, and other things that lies for experiments.
Yeah, that
or
part
maybe
threw me.
Represent the gambling industry.
Yeah, I don't know about that one.
And this is where there's still, even though there's some mature stuff. Oh, we're gonna protect ourselves from superheroes by this robot we call the Bug.
Yeah, what? It just felt so like we were in one place.
And it has
and we
needles
to
that
another.
drip acid, ooh, and flamethrowers.
Yeah. And then
and we have a long sequence with the police going over things. The weird thing is, even though he's a superhero and all the Justice League come to his wife's funeral, none of the superheroes think, let's use our superpowers to try to figure out who killed your family.
yeah,
Only the police are working on it. Until the Mirror Master comes along.
Yeah.
Because he's been betrayed by the government and he wants Animal Man's help collecting his fee. So if you're an evil corporate master, be sure to pay your assassins their money after they do the dirty deeds for you, or they will turn against you.
And that won't end well. Yeah. And then you're basically at 21, right?
Right. So I also, about issue 20 with all his grieving, I just wanted to say, again, I think for a comic book in 1989, a superhero having his family brutally murdered sort of on screen and us seeing him really become a total wreck over it and not, not saying, putting on the mask and saying, with great power comes great responsibility, I'm going to go solve the crime, but instead falling to pieces is a nice twist. Even though there's lots of silliness in this issue, gives it a much more grown-up feel than I might have expected back then from most superhero comics.
That's fair. And to me, it just seemed so right. I guess I didn't put a lot of thought to that. Like, that just seemed like the flow of the story. That seemed right. Just the jarring Bugman bit threw me.
Right. There were these both silly stuff and a more mature approach to to grief and to horrible crimes than you might get in an older comic. Although it's very unsatisfying to have a superhero who only takes action when a villain comes along and tells him, I know how to get these people. Of course, at this point, he's decided he just wants to kill his family's killers.
Right. Which, I don't know, with the... I don't know. But he starts off this issue with like cutting his hair, and the artist did a good job showing like little bits all askew and all that.
Yeah, and he puts on his old punk leathers, he claims, which is just a darker uniform, but
right,
with this kind of wacky glasses on it. So anyway,
yeah.
And then the rest of the issue is him killing everybody, right?
Yeah, one by one with his animal powers in a really weird way, and
he gets to use his new, more powerful animal powers to kill off all these people. He doesn't have any moments of doubt or, normally you'd expect a superhero to pull back at the last minute. There's nothing. I mean, he's behaving exactly like Magneto might behave or something.
But he's also more animalistic, I think, is part of it too. Like for all the nobility and whatnot that we talk about with animals and all that, there are, animals, and I thought this was kind of playing on that idea too.
It's we humans who are into revenge, and very few animals kill their own kind.
Yeah, well, there's that.
But I see what you're saying. Yeah, he's becoming, I don't know, he's becoming something else, which isn't, maybe the loss of his family makes him lose a sense of morality too, although he's already been, shaky before this, in my opinion. Although I don't know if Grant Morrison thinks his morality has been shaky before this.
Well, the way they have it at the end is stop thinking. I must be an animal. And
right. And then he says, I can fix it all. So he is upset after he's killed everybody. He's then a bit upset that he says, I feel nothing. I can fix it. I can fix it. I have an idea, a time machine. All I need is a time machine. I can fix everything. But he's become very much in the mold of your typical villain, supervillain, who's gone a little crazy, is into revenge, and now is going to follow apparently a foolish path to try to fix things.
Well, what's wrong with using a time machine to fix your problems? Rip Hunter does it all the time.
That's true.
He's getting his own TV show. I mean, it's all just going to work out fine.
True, and he does get his time machine eventually from Rip Hunter.
And Booster Gold's there.
For no apparent... Well, Booster Gold's supposed to have time machines, isn't he?
Yeah.
Whereas Booster Gold lost his time machine.
Depends where he was at the time. I don't know.
But it seems anyway that Rip Hunter purposefully gave him a malfunctioning broken time machine, which he goes ahead and uses, and turns him into it's very trippy, and then it turns him into a time ghost.
Yeah. Ghost. Yeah, that's a good way of
And
putting it.
I enjoyed that. I thought that was clever. I thought it was fun to see someone become this time ghost. And we now see even more that ties back to issues 10 and 12 issues before.
Yeah, and before that, there's even the bit you were talking about before where they're showing a Flash comic in the panel and actually referencing that one issue where they introduced the multiverse.
Oh, right. The Flash of Two Worlds.
Yeah, because it's in Psycho Pirate's hands.
Right. The Psycho Pirate has it. Yeah. Yeah, that's very interesting. And then he says, the Psycho Pirate's last line is, "I love comic books."
Only villains love comic books.
So he travels all through time. He visits himself. I don't know the significance of him visiting himself as a young teenager. Then he hooks up with the Phantom Stranger.
Well, and before the Phantom Stranger, all the flashes we've seen of this darker animal man is right here.
Right. Everything is now tied together and makes sense.
Well,
except for why they need the Psycho Man in the story, but maybe that's still to come.
Yeah. But some of it kind of plays together so you can see flashes of supposedly the good times and
right.
Yeah.
But yeah, so and that's where we left off. So we kind of covered these issues really quickly. But you know, that's how it goes. It's all more one story rather than a lot of smaller stories.
Well, and this is just leading up till the end. Like it's kind of the ramp up before that bit where it's all going to kind of end one way or another.
Yeah. Now I did not read the next issue, issue 23, but I looked at the cover. And after looking at it a bit, I decided that that's a hippie version of Archie with Betty and Veronica.
Ah.
And I have and then with the Phantom Stranger and Animal Man in the background. So I'm very interested if there's going to be any actual references to Betty and Veronica and Archie, or whether the cover artist just sort of stuck that in there.
Well, we'll have to find out next time.
Yeah. So anyway, overall I really enjoyed this sequence, and I think when we started this book, I thought, well, maybe Grant Morrison just kind of sucked back then. But now I feel like, you know, whatever it is that goes on in that Grant Morrison brain was already there, kind of ticking away.
You
so
can see
there's still a lot of
process.
sloppiness.
Yeah.
Right.
The seams show a bit more, but it's there.
And I'm surprised how slow he is to roll out the idea. I mean, we see his computer here and there, his coffee cup. So he throws out a few pages of, oh yeah, there's someone writing this. And we talk about a creator who's, you know, there's references to the fact that we're in a comic book, but then he keeps backing away from it. He wants to really drag this out.
Yeah.
And I'm just not sure how much a reader at the time would be anticipating everything that's coming. It seems very obvious now because I know, well, I read some of these issues before, and also it's just sort of famous what happens near the end here.
I was skimming some of the letters in the back, and there was definitely a lot of outpouring.
You have the letters pages, I don't.
Right.
So sorry, go ahead.
And there's a lot of this kind of mentality of people being glad that there's these stories exploring something more. Like they love superhero comics a bit more. You get a sense of an older crowd, older at this point, maybe just meaning teenager even, but people wanting a little bit more than just like the Silver Age stuff, and taking and accepting and building on that and getting more out of the stories. Some people just glad that there's a few letters saying, you know, I'm loving this and Doom Patrol, and it's just kind of interesting to see. And I get the sense that this was DC kind of saying, okay, well, we have our staple stuff, but we also have kind of this other crowd that's looking for something. And I don't think the word that they would have used was darker necessarily, but it was more mature, but mature in the right sense of the word.
Well, I was in my mid-20s when I was reading this. I don't think I ever thought to write in letters, but it could well be that a lot of the audience was in their 20s.
Yeah.
And some in their teens too. And, you know, maybe they had a growing hunger for, you know, that was started with in the earlier part of the 80s with Alan Moore work and some other authors, but a lot of it to do with Alan Moore. And so they needed, it's funny that they just constantly turned to British writers, but anyway, they needed they had an audience for more of these kinds of books. And I think, you know, eventually this stuff that became the Vertigo line is what kept DC alive during the otherwise dark ages of the 90s. If they didn't have Vertigo, maybe they would have, you know, been even worse off than Marvel.
Maybe.
Who famously almost went into, who famously did go into bankruptcy and famously almost went out of business.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't know about that whole end of it, but I definitely think a lot of what people consider some of the strongest work of DC was happening, you know, in and around this time. And this was part of it.
Right. But I think that they, out of whatever good luck that they nurtured this more mature audience who maybe was more into it for the story than for the cool art and the big explosions, helped that they had carved out that niche for themselves, helped them during the time when everything was collapsing. Anyway, that's just my own theory.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to think too, because around this time, I mean, obviously there was the Vertigo stuff as we think of it now, I guess, but they were trying to do some more sci-fi stuff, and that didn't pan out too well. And they had stuff like Legends of the Dark Knight in around this time.
So I always thought the Legends of the Dark Knight was a little earlier, but it started in 1990. I've been collecting the back issues of it.
Okay, so I mean, it was the next year, so yeah.
But what I'm saying is that during this period of the late 80s, they were, even though other people were, you know, going in a Todd McFarlane, Mark Silvestri route over at Marvel,
Okay.
They were nurturing this smaller but very loyal audience that later would keep reading comic books when everyone else was gone. So I think intentionally, this turned out to be a really good thing for them. And eventually that audience has become kind of, in my opinion, one of the core audiences of comics, which is why, you know, so much of what's even published by Marvel and DC is kind of a more mature deconstructionist view of superheroes even now. Anyway, that's the way I view it all. It's kind of like this, it's almost like this small path, this small side path eventually became the main highway. They didn't know they were doing that then, but.
No, I hear you. I mean, that makes sense to me. I mean, I know this is technically reprinted under Vertigo, but reading this now, I can't think of this as a Vertigo book, if that makes sense. Because this is still.
But how about as a bridge between between Bronze Age DC and Vertigo?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely out of place. It's definitely like it has one foot in both worlds. And it plays with that pretty directly too, in a certain way. And I mean, it's funny though, because I mean, Sandman is definitely tied to the DC universe, but only because of a couple of issues from the very beginning.
Right.
And then really not so much. And that I consider that a straight Vertigo book. But I don't know, it's
but it did start originally. Gaiman was more radical in his storytelling, or his devotion to non-superhero storytelling, but it did start with its roots in the DC superhero world. There were several previous Sandman characters in the DC publishing history before that Sandman.
Oh yeah, and he meets up with Martian Manhunter and the whole nine. Like, and later
Right.
Sandman characters are brought back in later DC comics, but
Right.
it's also the Sandman. It's hard to think of it as
Right.
not a Vertigo book, I guess. But
so, I mean, you could say, and Morrison is pretty daring here, but you could say maybe he was less daring than Gaiman at this stage. I don't know where in the Sandman run this would have been. Was it happening pretty much at the same time? Did Animal Man and Sandman? I guess I can Wikipedia it. But.
I mean, I think so, but obviously Sandman went on further, whereas Grant Morrison did.
Well, it started in January 1989, so it might have even started a little after Animal Man. I'm not sure what.
Yeah, but it's definitely in the same season of comics, especially considering back then you didn't have these relaunches. Sorry?
Animal Man started about 4 months before Sandman.
Yeah.
So they were both being recruited into DC's program for getting British writers about the same time.
Oh yeah, and also, I mean, I think DC was smarter back then. I don't think they wanted to like start a whole bunch of new series all in the same month. They wanted to get some traction, and maybe build off that, and saying this is similar to this other thing that got so much acclaim or whatnot, instead of, all in the same week.
Well, they didn't know how this would turn out. They just gave editor Karen Berger more power, and her choice was to hire only British writers for a while.
Yeah.
So she had some kind of vision of a sort, or a developing vision.
Yeah, no, I mean, but obviously doing something right.
Yeah. No, she had very good taste and was taking big chances for probably an editor at DC at the time. They didn't actually start the Vertigo line until 1993.
Right, and by that point, most of anything we think of Vertigo already started.
Right. So we kind of, once they named the Vertigo line, I think by then that was when the comic industry was in trouble, or very close to it. So anyway, I just think to me, it's a flawed, fun to read story that also, for me, ties into kind of a bridge between different parts of comic book history.
Yeah.
And I bemoaned the art in many places through these 7 issues.
It is very Vertigo art, I feel like.
Yeah, but kind of the weakest end of Vertigo art.
I mean, yeah, but a lot of the art in Vertigo, to me, was always kind of B-rate. Not bad, but not up to the par of the writing, I guess. Yeah. Well, anyway, usually we've been rounding off these discussions with what's been going on the week of comics.
Right. Well, I tweeted out that. Well, did you have any more you want to say? But I guess you're done. But
yeah, I got.
I tweeted out that I couldn't get Faith at my comic book store, so today on my lunch break, I went to Things from Another World, and they had 2 copies left. So I bought one, and I've already read it.
Valiant. Okay.
Have you heard of this character, Faith?
I only heard about it because Reader 1717 was talking about it.
She was part of the Harbinger series, which was about a bunch of people with psychic powers who are abused by the Harbinger Foundation and then break off and fight against it. And so she's kind of like a mutant. It's kind of like Valiant's version of the X-Men. But she was raised by nerds who loved Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And her whole worldview is what she's gotten from nerd culture. And she's an overweight woman. And she's always cheerful and optimistic and trying to think good of people and that kind of thing. And she's a really good character. But I felt this issue got off to a kind of so-so start. Kind of reminded me of last week's Poison Ivy. There were some good things, but it also felt awkward, and the story didn't plunge you into interesting action in the first issue.
Okay.
So she's decided that you need to wear glasses, and she was wearing a wig, and you need to be a reporter if you're going to be a superhero. But she can't get a job at a regular newspaper, so she's at some kind of gossip website and stuff. So there's a lot of good touches. It just doesn't have a gripping plot yet. And when the bad guys try to shoot puppies, that kind of reminds me of Grant Morrison. That's when she finally can get really mad, and she sends them all flying out of the building. So she's a character with a lot of great potential, and I hope this writer, who I've never heard of, can do something. Jody Hauser. I hope she can do something good with her. Because it could be a really fun character.
Okay.
And I kind of wonder why they haven't given her own comic book sooner. It looks like it's selling out all over the place.
It's good to hear, actually. That's the sort of book that I just haven't touched Valiant because it's pricey and it's a whole other universe. And who's got the time?
I bought a whole
Everyone.
Valiant on digital sales for $1 a piece. And that's how I read a lot of Harbinger. I never know what to say it. But then I kind of fell off of it because when you're waiting for these digital sales, you tend to forget about it.
That's fair.
But when I saw Faith and I just really liked that character, I thought it would be really cool that it would be fun to get her, but not all the other Valiant comics.
Yeah, that's cool.
Did you get to read anything you got yet?
Yeah, I read most of my pile. Do you pick up Deadly Class?
I read the first trade and bought the second trade. I guess there's a third trade that I need. Yeah, so I'm running behind. Far behind. Was it a good issue?
Yeah, it's a good issue. When this Die For Me trade comes out, I think it's going to be kind of a big deal. So, because this series was kind of, it was good, but I felt like it was kind of wavering, and then the trigger is finally pulled, I guess, and it's glad for it.
Don't for my sake anyway about spoiling it, because by the time I read the trade, I'll have forgotten.
There's details and stuff. There's a lot of cool character moments, whatnot. But really, that was the big thing for me, is that this book has been kind of floundering and kind of a bit slow, and people have a lot more nostalgia for the 80s, have been enjoying it a lot more than I have. And I don't have a lot of nostalgia for the 80s because I barely remember the 80s. And this book finally, I think, was not resting on some laurels and just decided to do what it's been building to do. And it was a very sharp churn. And I was all for it.
Yeah, I remember that when it started, you were loving Deadly Class, and then you stopped liking it. And I actually had assumed you had dropped it, but I guess you kept reading it.
I was going to, but I kept talking to people who loved it so much, it kind of forced me to revisit and look at it and find a little bit more in it. And I just kind of kept going with it. And I'm glad I did now, but if I had trade waited, it probably would have been just as good. But this is, in my mind, Remender's second best book right now. So of the four, so that's not really a lot of kudos, I guess.
Well, that's 4 books that he's writing at once is impressive. Which one of his is your number one Remender book?
Tokyo Ghost.
Okay. which I'm trade waiting on everything except for Black Science. I just can't.
I can't wait for that art. Sean Murphy, man.
Uh-huh.
I can't wait.
Yeah, I really want to wait till the deluxe edition, but that's going to be a long wait.
Yeah, well, I might just wait for that and rebuy it, which I rarely do, but damn. Let's see here.
From the way you're talking about Deadly Class, I do worry sometimes with image books that many of them might have really been a 12-issue story, but if they're selling well, the authors stretch them. Do you feel that was happening in Deadly Class? Was there some stretching instead of getting to what he needed to get to, or did he really need all those issues to get to where he is now?
I mean, I feel like there might have been some dead points, but I felt like he was trying to do whatever with the time. Also, there were some breaks that he needed at certain issues. I feel like there's certain elements of the trade waiting that might have been holding it up, but less for like 12 issues and more for clean break points and trying to give the characters more meaning before you got to just high octane action. Is the roundest way I can put it. Did you read Daredevil 3?
No, because I get that through a mail subscription. It hasn't come yet.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So, do you continue to hate it?
Yeah. I think I have to drop it. It's just bad. I don't know quite how else to put it. It's just not Daredevil to me. It's not interesting. Right. It's not gripping. And after all this, I mean, spoilers, I guess, after all this hubbub of setting him up as a prosecutor, there's a page that deals with that in the third issue, and there's next to nothing in the second. And without the legal angle, and after them doing such a drastic thing with it, it just feels like this comic is so padded and so thin and so bleh. It's just not.
Well, I liked the first two issues, but maybe I'll hate it by the third. Who knows?
Well, if I can convince you in any way to hate it, I.
Well, I liked the first two issues so much that I, with the click of a button, renewed my subscription. So I think I have about 16 more issues that I've already paid for. You don't love it that
much if you want it through the subscription, where they come up all banged up, covers.
Mine are not banged up at all.
It must be something, come to the Rocky Mountains. They just can't handle the turbulence. I don't know.
I guess, or maybe I've just been very, very lucky. But yeah, I would, if it came as banged up as you're talking about, I wouldn't probably.
A few issues of mine have. Some of them are just a little bent at the corners, which if it was only that ever, I put up with it. But some of them have been pretty bad.
Yeah. So, like, here's my Daredevil 1. There is a slight bend right there.
Yeah, which sucks, but
and that happens in about, maybe for me, 1 out of every 8 of these subscription issues is that banged up, and that's it.
Oh, see, I think that's a good one where I wouldn't complain. Most of the ones I'm talking about are way worse.
So mine come out fine. I don't know. Yeah, maybe you live in a zone where they abuse mail more than my zone.
Well, what's doubly frustrating is I bought a new mailbox just for this, so they can flat.
I am so behind on my reading.
Omega Men?
So I got Omega Men, but I haven't read it yet. Okay. Does it make any more sense, this issue?
Yeah. Yeah, good. It does. There's a page that wigged me out.
I still feel horrible for after the first 4 issues of Omega Men saying this is, going to be a brilliant masterpiece, and then it started falling apart.
That's the problem of trying to say something's going to be good before you can finish reading it, because those first 4 issues were real good, and then the quality took a bit of a dive. I still think it's a good book, but
right, it's
now
less. It's not as tight.
Yeah,
as it seemed like it was good.
It's not what it was. 0.
But that's part of buying things monthly, is you want to feel like you're on a roll and you're onto something exciting. That's part of the game of it, I guess. Part of why I'm not waiting for trades on so many of these books.
That's the problem with those $3.99 books. You know, it's a gamble, and it's just too much to gamble.
Right. Well, luckily, Omega Man is not $3.99.
Yeah, and neither is Batman and Robin. Did you read that one?
See, I haven't. Other than Faith, I haven't read anything yet.
Oh, okay. Well,
this would have been my reading time right now as we speak.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, this one.
Was this Orlando again? I was very worried because I think I saw that it was going to be the Orlando, which is the only writer whose issues I didn't like.
No, it's Ed Brisson.
Oh, interesting, huh?
Whoever that is.
It seemed like it seemed like it was building up to be kind of a key moment. I would have thought it would be scripted by Tinian.
Well, I feel like it was such a key moment you couldn't screw up the writing that much. Because this is a big turnaround issue, and when it did, I was like, oh, that's how they're doing that. Oh, okay. And I was honestly a little down.
A bit of disappointment there then, coming my way.
Well, I think you'll be fine with it. I was just a little, I don't know. And brace your sensibilities for the new saga.
Is there something upsetting in here?
There's some gay sex.
Oh, great. Well, I mean, I only say that and I don't want to see too much detail, and they'll probably show me more than I want to see. But I think they peaked at the dragon sucking himself off. I don't know if anything can get beyond that. Remember that issue?
Classic.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. It doesn't look as shocking as the dragon sucking himself off.
And then there was the default best book of the week.
Did the Turtles book come out this week?
Darn tootin'. Look at that cover, though. Love that.
Did that dragon have any self-pleasuring? That is a great cover.
That dragon didn't self-pleasure itself, no.
So how's the current artist on Turtles?
Do they have a good art? So, Michael Dilanis is the
heard of him,
penciler.
but do you like him?
I think it's great. I've really actually liked all the artists they've had except for one so far. So, yeah, I think it's pretty solid.
Because during that period, under your influence, when I was reading Turtles, I was really enjoying it, and then the artist changed, and it was a huge shock for me. And for a while, I kept buying digital issues after then, but I didn't keep up with it. So I still have to go back.
Who was that?
The artist that I really liked later said that he is really a she. That I can't remember what his name is.
Oh yeah, who was Ross Campbell and now is
Ross Campbell.
Not. So Andy Kuhn was the artist that I didn't like on Turtles. That I think is who you read when the artist changed, and that was a bit much.
He's the artist who threw me off. I think something like the Turtles, because it's such a silly basic concept, right? These giant ninja turtles. I need the right art to make me buy into it.
That's fair.
I try to avoid the $3.99 new books, but I did give in and buy this one called Strayer.
Okay.
Which is about someone in some, I think it's about I haven't read it yet, someone in some future Earth who kills giant monsters for money. I love giant monsters.
Let me know what that is. That's some off-brand publisher, right?
It's some new like publisher that just started publishing 3 months ago, but has a lot of fairly big names. But
Okay.
this is Justin Jordan, so this is a smaller. I mean, I know who Justin Jordan is, but he's not as big of a name as, like, I think they have a Jimmy Palmiotti book and a Brian Azzarello book and stuff like that. And there's a giant monster. I don't know if this will be any good, but it's dangerous. What if I, start liking too many of these $4 books?
Yeah.
At least it's not a cheap Marvel $4 book, which I do think I'm going to start. I'm going to be picking up the Vision since I don't have a subscription to that.
I've heard good things.
That's painful because it's such a floppy little book for $4.
Yeah.
With ads all over the place. Oh well.
Oh, he did do Guardians. That's right. Okay. I was trying to remember who Justin Jordan was.
Oh, okay. I think is he the one who does the spread for Image?
Uh-huh.
I think that, but I'm not sure.
That's right. Yeah.
I picked up Island and I hate the cover of it. But
I
again,
hate that cover too. Yeah, I have to catch up on Island. I have to catch up on a couple Islands, actually. It's been a while.
Yeah, me too. Very easy to fall behind on something like Island because you feel like, well, I might as well save up some issues to get the whole story, and then it's slid back into the pile. And it looks like there's a long comic with the same style on the inside. I may just skip this story unless it really hooks me quick. Oh man.
Yeah. There's a lot of talk at the shop about that one. We're like, really? So
the second story has some pretty neat art in it, but
yeah.
I don't know, maybe there's a whole bunch of people out there it's almost like My Little Pony art or something.
Well, it's definitely more webcomic furry stuff, which there's a segment for, but I'm not sure that's the segment going to the comic shops, but I know the type.
It looks like there's just 2 comics in this issue. It's also like when I look at Island, I have trouble figuring out, is this story going to be continued or is it done in this issue?
Yeah, I'd prefer if they did more like 2 story things where you just had the story in the issue instead of flopping between them.
And then some it'll say, and part 2 will be coming in issue 8.
Right, and
issue 8 is 6 months away.
Right. Which means they have a lot of confidence that they're going to be able to sell X amount.
Right. For me, this is still pretty good value for the money so far, so I'll keep getting it for now. I don't like talking about supporting comic books, but I kind of like supporting anthologies to a degree.
I just straight up been enjoying it. It's something
right.
I like looking at. So,
well, and it is fun to see what never heard of will show up in these pages.
Yeah.
A locally published comic. What's it called? Fading Legend. It was black and white. It has no dialogue.
Wow.
I think with color it would be pretty professional looking art, but the writer, there actually was a separate writer from the artist who wrote the dialogueless story, and I don't think there's enough of a story here, but anyway, that was interesting. Because I went into a different comic book store than I normally do, and they actually were carrying some stuff by local artists. I thought that was cool.
Well, that's always cool.
So, was it when you said the Turtles story was the best issue just because it's always the best issue, but was it a particularly good issue of Turtles, or is Turtles going through a very good period right now, or?
Well, I mean, I always think it's the best, but I really honestly, genuinely thought it was the best issue, and I always think that. It's just, to me, it's such a good book. So, yeah, Also, honestly, the rest of the stuff I got this week, not as hot from. I mean, Saga's pretty cool and all that, but it's got to a point where it's not the creative burst that it was when it started. And I love reading it, but it's not, you know, it's not the same energy behind it.
Right. It's just like another chapter in a very long story at this point, rather than a lot of interesting climaxes all the time.
Right, and I feel like each issue of Turtles kind of earns its place, like it is an issue.
And last week I got Amazing Forest. Have you seen this one?
No, that looks really cool though.
It's from IDW, but it definitely feels like a self-published comic. The coloring isn't, but it has stories that are, so it's a bunch of short stories, and they are kind of like old EC stories, you know, with a twist at the end, but it's always something a little creepy. Like there's one where there's this farm where the husband went off to war and he comes back, but he's inside a giant robot suit and he won't come out of his robot suit. So it's drawn in a very extremely indie style.
Yeah.
But it's basically like an old EC story with a weird twist at the end. I guess I shouldn't give things away when they have twist endings, but yeah. Anyway, yeah, it's very, so it's weird because it's like a very modern indie comic in one way and like a very old comic book in another way. So I don't know if I'll actually add it to my pull list, but if I can keep getting it at the store, I'll probably try it for a few more issues.
Awesome.
But it's $3.99 too. Trying to think if there's anything else. I mean, I just haven't read a whole lot in the past week. So, but I did get a lot of comics. I got Monstrous, but then I realized I haven't even read Monstrous #2 yet. I read a lot of Monstrous #1. I've got Justice League 3001, which looks like it's becoming an all-girl future Justice League. But I haven't read the issue before. And in the issue before they killed Superman, but they can bring everyone back to life here in this future time.
Oh, okay.
So we've got a female Guy Gardner, we've got Supergirl, we've got Wonder Woman, we've got a female Flash, and we've got a girl who wears a Batman robot suit. And then this green woman and this white woman who I don't even know who they are. So
Fire and Ice.
Fire and Ice, that's probably who they are.
I'm a little sad that Wonder Woman isn't now just Wonder Man and then like the only man. That would be a...
Right. Yeah, they're only turning men into women, no women into men so far.
Right.
Then you could swap sexes between characters and then have them get into relationships. They get really interesting.
There's places on the internet for that.
Hey, it could happen in real life too. I wonder if there must have somewhere been a couple where they both changed their sex and stayed married.
Somewhere.
If you're out there, let us know. There may be a good comic book in your life experience. I'm always weary of picking up a new Justin Jordan book. Is Luther Strode. Oh, he did that? I've always meant to read Luther Strode. The art there looks really cool. And way earlier in our conversation, I think when we were still looking at Animal Man's 64-page special, said it looks like storyboard art. So I'm not sure what page we were showing when he said that. But I can see what he means. The storyboard art probably is less detailed.
Yeah, who knows what he's talking about half the time, right? So
That 64-page special. Well, I guess I'm pretty much out of stuff. I'm excited to read the next 4 issues of Animal Man. Maybe we could read it by the weekend and talk about it on Sunday or something.
Yeah, I think I should be good for that. Yeah. So we'll catch up with everyone later and have a good one.
Thanks for watching.